Welcome, and thank you for joining us on our live stream. We believe here at Active that you are worth knowing, so we created this content designed for you to explore your faith and belief wherever you're at. So welcome, and please enjoy the message.
My name is Joe Valenzuela, and this is my fiance.
My name's Diana Purdy, and this is my fiance, and we've been together for about 1.5 years.
And we are getting married in 7 months. Our story's kind of a funny one because it's not really the conventional type. She actually messaged me first on Instagram.
He loves to tell the story like that, and even if I did, it worked. So I actually was following him for a while through some mutual connections, and I responded to one of his Insta stories, and the rest is history.
Next thing you know, I'm asking her if she wants to go have tacos because every first great date starts at tacos. We had similar passions, similar interests. We had things that we both were so excited for about the future and things that we've gone through in the past. Once we were in the full swing of dating, I immediately realized this was totally different than anything I've ever experienced before, because there was this level of safety and partnership that I've never seen or I've never experienced in the context of a relationship. She assured me in the ways that I need to be assured, but she also let me know that she was walking alongside me in the rough moments, which made me want to do the same for her in even greater ways. So it's been this constant battle of wanting to outdo each other in ways of love and ways of partnership. I knew from all of that, like, there's nothing greater than what we can do together.
Any fears I had previously before dating him had just subsided and gone away, and I just knew in my heart that this was it. All those fears I had just went away, and I knew that God was assuring me that this was the one that he had for me.
We began to have conversations about developing healthy habits early on, healthy habits in the way that we talk to each other, healthy habits in the way that we communicate with one another, and even in healthy habits in the way that we fight with one another, because we knew that once we got married, it wasn't just gonna magically go away. We knew we had to develop the healthy habits early on because we were gonna carry all of these things into our marriage. And so over the past couple months, and especially early on in our relationship, we did some really strategic things in order to get a better framework for what a healthy relationship looks like.
I feel like no one ever really prepares you for dating. Everything out there is for marriage, which is great, but dating is a time where you're setting that foundation for the future. And as we realized early on that this was it for us, we were really intentional about surrounding ourselves with people from both of our sides who had walked this journey of marriage and who were seasoned in this. And so we were intentional about surrounding ourselves with people who were asking us hard questions, who were keeping us accountable in certain areas, who were rejoicing with us in just moments of happiness, and who walked alongside of us in difficult seasons as well.
With every hard argument, with every hard conversation, with every moment that we've had tension, what we realize is that it's all worth the fight. Everything that doesn't feel often worth it in the moment is so worth the fight. It's so worth the fight, fighting for our future.
Oh, that's so good. Welcome to Active Church, everybody. You awake? Are you here? Are you with me? Hi. So great to see you. My name is Mike. I serve on the team here at Active, and we are one church in 2 locations. So welcome to our Yucaipa location, and welcome to those that are watching from our Redlands location, for a series that we're calling Fight, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But if you are a first-time guest with us, you are showing up for the very first time today, we are honored that you are here. There is a welcome home card in your seat back. Would you take a moment? Would you grab that card and fill it out? Or if it's more convenient for you, you can text welcome to the number on the screen. And either way, please make sure your name. And every card and every text message that we receive in the month of October, we are sending a care package to the Pregnancy and Family Resource Center in San Bernardino. It's an organization that one of our activators has introduced us to. And they do some really incredible work, not just in San Bernardino, but in the Inland Empire. And we're sending a care package to them. And so if you're interested in seeing what that care package looks like, you can stop by Guest Central today, and they would love to show you what that looks like. But every card and every text message that gets turned in, that gets showed at Guest Central, we're going to write that down and make sure that we send a care package at the end of our time, end of our month, and send that to the Pregnancy and Family Resource Center. Right now, we are over 25 care packages that are going to be sent because of cards and text messages that have been filled out in the last 2 weeks. So we hope that you'll do that this morning, and it's a way that we together can provide hope in a very simple way. Next Sunday is not so spooky Sunday, so if you have kids, bring them. They can dress up. We're going to teach them how to trunk or treat right, and we're going to give them a bunch of candy, and then we're going to send them home with you. All right? So that's next Sunday, and it's all leading up to Trunk or Treat, which is happening at both of our locations on Thursday, October 31st. You've heard all about it, but here's the thing that I would invite you to step into. We would love for you to host a trunk. We would love for you to serve with us, and we would love for you to bring candy, because we give out over 1 million pieces of candy at both of our locations, and so the more candy we have, the better the night will go. Maybe not for parents, but for us here at Active, it'll go really well. So I want to invite you to consider hosting a trunk. I want to invite you to consider serving on a serve team, and I want to invite you to consider bringing candy. You can sign up in the lobby at both of our locations today, and Trunk or Treat is an event that I love, and I can't wait to see you there on October 31st. The very first fight that Tiff and I had was about 4 months into our marriage. Now, we had engagement fights, and most of them were my fault, all right? But our very first marriage fight was when I came home, and we had just moved into our new duplex. And Tiffany said to me when I came home, I got us a home phone and a new home phone number. Now, this was a time that we didn't just give our lives and our souls to our cell phones. This was a time that we actually had home phones. Remember those times? Reminiscing about those times? But we had this new phone and this new phone number, and so I got home. She told me she was proud of herself. She had done this while I was at work. And so I said, great, what's the number? And the phone number she gave me, for whatever reason, just ticked me off. It made me mad. Because I've been living in this town since I was born. I had about 6 years where my family and I moved away. We went to Oregon, and then we moved back because everybody comes back to the Inland Empire, right? It's the Mecca of the universe, or at least we like to think that it is. And I remember when she told me the phone number, I got irritated. Because for years, I had grown up with a 797 number. And some of you have been around for a long time. We're like, hallelujah, right? But she told me that our new phone number started with a 446. And I was not having it. I got mad, and I asked her these questions. Did you ask for a 797 number? Did you demand that we would have a different number than this number? Did you even consider the fact that this homegrown boy would want a 797 number? By the way, she didn't respond to any of those questions. She just looked at me and asked one question. Are you a psycho? Isn't it true that in relationships, we fight over the silliest things? And isn't it true in relationships we choose not to fight for the most meaningful things? That's what this series is all about. It's learning how to not fight against one another, but how to fight for each other. Last week, we talked about how you and I have a box. And in that box are our hopes and our dreams and our desires. And everything in here is good. None of these things are bad. Everything in here is something that we're longing for. Maybe for you, you're longing to have a child. And then maybe some of you, your hopes and dreams and desires is not just to have a child, but you would like a family, right? You want to make sure that both of your arms are full of crying, screaming, wonderful children, right? Some of you are nuts because you have 5 kids and you hold one of them with your leg, right? And the other one's on your, and you're wondering why you're not getting any sleep. And all of us that have grown-up kids are like, that stinks, right? But we're praying for you, right? Or maybe you have a hope and a dream and a desire to drive an incredibly sweet car. Something that maybe has a whole lot of power when you drive. Something that you can rev up the engine. You know, a mom van doesn't do that. I've tried, all right? But you want a nice, good-looking car. I actually discovered this week that I had a hope and a dream and a desire that I didn't know was in me. My wife and I were invited to a birthday party, and it was someone from our connection group. And at the birthday party, our job was to go and to paint. And that week leading up to this party, I was thinking, you know what? I have a hope and a dream and a desire to be an artist. Or at least I didn't know this until they invited me to come. And we sat down and we had someone teach us how to paint a picture of Jack Skellington, because it's Halloween. And we're all sitting down getting ready to paint this picture of Jack Skellington. And I had a hope and a dream and a desire to be an artist. And then this happened. Don't patronize me, all right? I know that you're all wanting to be like Jesus. Just stop it for a moment, okay? I'll have you know that they gave me a trophy that night that said my best was not good enough. And so now I'm looking for new friends and a new connection group. So applications are being accepted today. And so that dream went away. That dream disappeared. But the truth is we all have hopes, dreams, and desires, don't we? And they're not bad. They're good. And what we discovered last week as we began this series called Fight is that when we enter into relationship, dating, engaged, married, coupling, it's complicated, whatever relationship that we're in, we have this box and we have a tendency to hand this box to the person that we love. And for them, it doesn't feel like hopes and dreams and desires. It feels like expectations. And expectations are the strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future, where you hope that they will fulfill every desire that you have. You hope that they will fulfill every dream that you've dreamed about. And when you hand your box to the person that you love, it doesn't feel like hopes, dreams, and desires. It feels like responsibility. It feels like homework. And we're left wondering why they're not enjoying this relationship. We're left wondering and considering why things are not going well. And so last week we began this conversation and we asked a really important question of ourselves. How do we keep our hopes and our dreams and our desires from becoming expectations? And the first thing that we learned last week, one of 4 things that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks, but the first thing that we learned about was that in order to keep our box from becoming expectations in the hands of the one that we love, we needed to begin to practice gratitude. And gratitude is appreciating what you have while you have it. Letting them know, not just feeling it, but expressing gratitude to the one that you love and telling them how much you are grateful for what they've done. And we're not just talking about those major things that happen in your relationship, although those are important. But we're talking about those moments where they did something that maybe you expected them to do, they decided to fulfill that role, and you still said thank you. Because we learned that when we don't express gratitude, we will not communicate a grateful heart to those in our lives that we're in relationship with when they do the thing that they said they were going to do. Often we expect them to do the laundry. We expect them to set the table. We expect them to take care of the food. We expect them to care for the kids. And when they don't, we ask them why. And what we learned last week is that handing our box to somebody becomes expectations. And being able to keep it from becoming expectations begins when we express gratitude, appreciating what we have while we have it. Now, I get to do this almost every week. I get to share with you almost every week here at Active Church. And every week, I'll receive a few text messages, a couple of direct messages on social media, maybe even a few emails from you. And you'll share with me, and I feel privileged to be on the receiving end of this. You'll share with me how God spoke to you, moved you, challenged you. I'll get questions about things, and I love those interactions. Last week, those messages and emails and text messages tripled. You shared with me what God was doing in your relationship. And I was privileged to be able to receive those and interact with you, and I'm thankful that you trust me with that. I even saw on social media husbands and wives, boyfriends and girlfriends expressing gratitude to one another over simple things like, hey, thanks for going to work and caring for our family. Hey, thanks for taking care of the kids. Hey, I'm grateful that I get to wake up in the morning next to you. It was a game changer for a lot of us. I have a new friend who's a part of Active Church Redlands who sent me a message, and I asked if I could share just a piece of his message because it summarized so well what happened last week, and he wrote this to me. It opened the door for my wife and I to express gratitude. We feel like God is speaking right into our hearts. Isn't it interesting how something so simple like gratitude can be such a game changer for our relationships? And we ended last week with this question. When we're thinking about the one that we're in relationship with, we ended last week asking ourselves, what do they owe me? And grateful people answer that question with one word, nothing. They owe me nothing. And that's where we finished our time last week, and that's where I want to pick up the conversation. Because as I mentioned last week, each of these conversations are influenced by the previous, which is why I'm glad that you're here and you're not missing a week, because this will change your relationships and teach you how to fight for each other. Whether you're single and you want to be in a relationship, or you're dating, or you're engaged, or you're married, or you're not sure what the definition of your relationship is, this conversation will help you to fight for what matters most. And so if grateful people say, I'm owed nothing, then the next step for us today, the next piece of this relationship cake, the next slice, the next component is this, and I owe everything. Now, those are some heavy words. They almost feel like too heavy. Words that maybe we don't want to say to one another. But I want to explain to you what I mean when we say I owe everything. Your relationship and my relationship with our significant other, whether it's somebody we're dating, somebody we're engaged with, somebody we're married to, your relationship and my relationship is not about me. It's not about you. It's about we. And when we step into a relationship, a romantic relationship, the benefit should be that we are giving ourselves to that person to help them to tell a better story. And the reason why we believe this is not because we sat around a table and said, well, here's what Dr. Phil said. Here's what somebody on the news said. Here's what the relationship guru said. It's influenced and shaped by what Jesus said and what Jesus did. And I want to share with you a statement that he made that you have probably heard before if you've been at this church or any church. And if you're new to church, it's a powerful statement that you might be familiar with. But before I share this with you, I just want to speak to those that wouldn't consider themselves Christians here at Active Church today. First, I'm so grateful that you're here, because this is a space where we believe that you can belong long before you believe and behave like Christians. This is a space where you can engage God and pursue God, and we are honored that you would come into this space, and we've worked really hard to open our hearts and our hands, because we want this to be a place where all people of all backgrounds, of all spiritual journeys can come and discover the God that sent Jesus to die and to rise from the grave, because we believe that he is the best way forward. He is the greatest way forward. And what you'll discover if you're not a Christian is that you don't have to be a Christian to listen to the words of Jesus or to even apply the words of Jesus. What you'll discover is that Jesus will make your life better. Jesus will make your life better. The one thing that I'm convinced of, and many of you who are Christians are convinced of, is not only will Jesus make your life better, but Jesus will make you better at life. And it was John that wrote down the words of Jesus on a night before he was going to go to the cross and be crucified for the sins of the world. Extend forgiveness to everyone. And Jesus said this really famous statement after washing the feet of the disciples, taking the position of a servant during that time. Jesus made this statement sitting around the table with these 12 men, and John wrote it down. Jesus said, "A new command I give to you. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." Jesus uses the word command, and only God can give commands. So it's another indication that this isn't just some guy. This is God in the flesh. And then he says, I want you to love each other, which is a great narrative. It's a cultural buzzword for us today, that we should love one another. But what I love about Jesus is that he gives us the definitions, the parameters, the sandbox of what love looks like. He says, love like I have loved you. Not when you're trying to love the best way you know how, because you and I, we're fickle. We're moody. We get upset at wrong phone numbers when we wanted this one and we actually got that one, right? Jesus says, I want you to love as I have loved you. And that influences everything that we do. And it helps us in those moments when we don't know what to do. When you aren't sure what to say or do. What we do is this. We love like God, through Christ, has loved you. When you're not clear what to say or do, you choose to love like God through Christ loves you. This is what Jesus is inviting us into. And this is why I love the Bible. Because the writers of the scriptures wrote letters to men and women like you and me to invite them to step into a new way, a new story, a better story, the way of Jesus. And what Paul did, one of the most famous writers of the scriptures, is he took the words of Jesus and he teased them out. He applied them to everything in life. This is what it looks like in work. This is what it looks like in parenting. And this is what it looks like in your romantic relationships. And so I want to share with you what Paul did with this statement of Jesus. And how he helped us to understand what it looks like when we don't know what to say or do. We choose to love like God through Christ has loved you. Now, before we jump in, I want to say this to those people that are single and those people that are engaged and dating, but you're not married. What we're about to read was written specifically to married people. Because Paul believed, as do I, and as does Jesus in what he communicated, that the greatest expression of relationship is found in the context of biblical, godly Christian marriage. That the best way to love and to show intimacy is in the context of biblical Christian marriage. Now, that doesn't mean we always get it right. That doesn't mean that we won't find ways to mess it up. But Paul held the conviction, as do I, that if you love someone, you want them to be expressed and feel your love in the greatest way possible. And so that's why God has set up this beautiful story called marriage. So if you are not a Christian, if you are single, if you're dating, or if you're engaged, if you're not married today, if you're coupling, if you're in a relationship, and it's not in the context of marriage, then this is not fully for you. However, there is something in this for you. There's something that you can learn, there's something that you can apply, there's something that you can discover. I believe that if you put some of these things into practice, it will change your relationship forever. But for those of you that are married, this is something for you to apply and not just consider, but to step into. And it's Paul's way of inviting us to express God's love in us and through us in the best way possible to the one that we love. And so I want to show you what he said, and I want to talk about what it means for you and for me. And so if you brought a Bible with you today, we're going to be in Ephesians chapter 5, and we're going to start in verse 22. If you have the Bible app on your phone, you can open up your phone to that place as well. Ephesians is a letter that Paul wrote to Christians like you and me, groups of people that were trying to figure out how to pursue God. And this letter is found in the New Testament. Chapters and verses weren't there originally. It was written as a letter. We added those later so that we can follow along. And so if you have a Bible or if you have the Bible app on your phone, I would invite you to open that up because that's where we're going to spend most of our time today. If you don't have a Bible or the Bible app, that's okay. We'll have the verses on the screen for you at both locations, along with some notes for you to follow along with. The first thing that I'm going to read to you, that we're going to read together, will probably upset you. It'll probably make you uncomfortable, and I'm going to explain why, so don't check out, all right? Here's the first thing that Paul writes in regards to our relationships as we look at what Jesus has done for us, and then we do this for one another. The first thing that Paul writes, Ephesians chapter 5, starting in verse 22, he says, "Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord." Now, immediately, you might feel a bit uncomfortable with that. And as you should. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about them. Because during this time, this wouldn't have made them uncomfortable. They would have responded with, right, and not wrong. This is right, not wrong. This is good. It doesn't make us uncomfortable. And the reason why they would respond that way is because the men during that time had women as commodities, as things, as stuff. Women had no value. They couldn't speak up. Men were the kings of the community during that time, and women could not speak to them without being spoken to first, even in the marriage relationship. And so when Paul writes, "Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord," all of the people would have received that as, this is right and not wrong. Now, here's what's interesting about this statement. In the Greek, which is what Paul used to write these letters to us, in the Greek, Paul uses Greek rules and not English rules. In other words, what we see in our language is very different than in the Greek language. And Paul, when he writes this, he actually uses a verb in the very first sentence of his paragraph. And in the Greek language, you have permission to use that verb every other time as you write. And so you could say, "We're running," and then the rest of the paragraph that you're writing would determine that you're running. You wouldn't have to state it again like you do in the English language. So originally, what Paul wrote to us is actually what you see right now on the screen. In verse 22, Paul writes this, "Wives, to your husbands as to the Lord." And what happened there is Paul is using the verb from the previous sentence to influence everything that he is saying from that point forward. So then the question is, well, what verb did he use? And in what context did he use that verb? Well, in verse 21, Paul writes this, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." That the very first thing that you are to do as you enter into relationship, not in romantic relationship, but just in friendship relationship with people, is you are to begin to see those relationships as, how can I give everything? How can I serve? And the reason why you're taking that perspective is you're doing that out of reverence for Christ. In light of what God has done for you, you will do that for others. This is how Paul opens up the whole paragraph. And this is why he begins with the word submit. And if you need some help in defining the word submit, let me help you. We already said it. Here's what it looks like. When you don't know what to say or do, love like God, through Christ, has loved you. That's what it looks like in relationships with friends. That's what it looks like in non-romantic relationships. But what about those relationships that we enter into that are romantic? What Paul is saying to us when he uses the word submit is this: I'm here for you, you for me, but I'm not here for you because you're here for me. I'm here for you because Jesus is here for me. Are you with me? I'm going to say it to you one more time. Here's what submission out of reverence for Christ looks like in our romantic relationships, particularly in the context of marriage. I'm here for you, and you for me, but I'm not here for you because you're here for me. I'm here for you because Jesus is here for me. This is the context of what it looks like in marriage in particular, because that's what he's talking about. But as you can see, you can influence and shape your dating and engaged relationships in the same way. Which is why Paul starts this whole conversation with this statement: wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Now, 2 thoughts on that. First, all of the women at Active Church began to think about all of the men that are not worth submitting to, haven't you? You began to think through all of the guys that are not worth submitting to. So I just want to give you some help. I already did the math, and I want to give you the number of men that are not worth submitting to. And the number is this: 100%. 100% of men are not worth submitting to. And by the way, this is why I prefaced everything that Paul is talking about marriage, because this isn't saying that all women should submit to all men. This is saying, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Now here's why this is powerful. The statement of submitting is saying to the one that you're in relationship with, through your actions and your words, I'm placing their hopes and their dreams and their desires before mine. But husbands, fellas, Paul's not leaving you out. Because in the very next verse, he says this: husbands, love your wives. To which all of the men would go, yes, absolutely, this is what we should do. And Paul would say, shh, you're talking. You shouldn't be talking. I'm writing, and this is really good. Husbands, love your wives just as. He's about to give us an analogy that would help us to understand what love should look like and how it should be expressed in our marriage relationships, in our dating relationships, in our engaged relationships. He says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Husbands, the way that we love our wives when we're not sure how to love our wives looks like this. When you're not sure what to say or do, you love like God through Christ loves you. And here's why that statement was so radical during that time. Because what Paul is writing here is this: men and women have equal value. Now, you didn't go, what? Or be shocked by that statement. And do you want to know why? Because this is something that is intuitive in us today, isn't it? Doesn't mean we always get it right, and we're still fighting for it, but here's what's true. This is something that you and I assume to be true. We know to be true. This is not something that we arm wrestle or question. We don't look at someone of the opposite gender and say, I'm better than them. What we understand is that we are equal, and the reason why we are equal is because Jesus announced that centuries ago, before it was awesome, before you would hashtag it, before anybody would fight for it, before any political candidate said, we're gonna do this. Jesus announced your value because he died for you and rose from the grave for you. This is why if you're a female, you should consider Jesus, because nobody fought for your equality until Jesus came along. And he continues to fight for your equality because he made you in his image. And just because you can't grow facial hair, or at least some of you, right? Doesn't mean you don't have value. And the announcement here is that men and women have equal value. And that's why when we hear wives submit to their husbands, we immediately go back. If you're not a Christian, most non-Christians, if they look at the scriptures, that's one of the verses that they'll take and say, see, God hates women and the church hates women. And Paul would respond, no. What I'm communicating is this: I'm here for you. You're here for me. But I'm not here for you because you're here for me. I'm here for you because Jesus is here for me. Because when I don't know what to say or do, I'm going to love like Christ has loved you. But Paul's not done, because he spends a little bit more time on the men. Because men, isn't it true that we need a little bit more help? And so just so we're clear as to what this looks like, Paul says this in verse 28. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. And he who loves his wife loves himself. There's this powerful image in the scriptures when a man and a woman become married. and when they express love to each other in a physical act called sex and intimacy. The writers of the scriptures describe that as a moment where their souls intertwine. It's not just a physical act, but their souls are connected. This is why divorce is so painful. This is why losing your spouse is so difficult. Because it feels like someone has torn your flesh. And for those of you that have lost someone, your courage and your bravery to continue to move forward is inspiring for us. And for those of you that have gone through the pain of divorce, the way that you have carried yourself is beautiful. Because divorce is devastating. And it's soul-crushing. And the reason it is because you have intertwined your soul with someone. And so if you're here at Active Church today or you're watching online and you've gone through the loss of a life, of a spouse, or the loss of divorce, and you're still breathing, we're grateful for you. And what you've modeled for us is inspiring to us. Because sometimes divorce can be the end of the story. And we can eliminate ourselves from speaking authoritatively about things, can't we? Which is why I'm so grateful for you. And this is why these words are so important. Because there is a better way forward, especially in marriage, so that we can learn to fight for each other and not against one another. Paul's point, essentially, is this. What is life to you? As you think about life, you say, this is living. This is the life. Maybe you've put your feet up on that beach with your coffee in your hand, and you said, this is the life. Or maybe you drove down the road in your incredible sports car, and you said, this is the life. Or maybe you sat in the backyard in your pool, and you had your family. You said, this is the life. Paul's point is this. Whatever life is to you, put them, your spouse, the one that you love, before that. Whatever life is to you, put them before that. Or in other words, when you're not sure what to say or do, love like God through Christ has loved you. And by the way, for this to work, it has to be mutual. So that means that, fellas, we can't say to the one that we love, here's what you need to do. And ladies, you can't say to the one you love, here's the objectives that you need to accomplish. Didn't you hear what Mike said from the Bible on Sunday? He said that you need to love me like Christ loves the church. So get started, right? This isn't about them. This is about you. And for this to work, it has to be mutual. Which is why Paul started with these words, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. I love my wife because Jesus loves me. And I want her to be better. After I release her, let her go, after I lose my life, whatever God intends, I want her to be better than how I found her. Because that's what God does for me. So when I'm not sure what to say or do, I'm going to love like God through Christ has loved me. And I know that didn't rhyme, but forgive me. And I would invite you to do the same thing. Do you see why he's speaking about marriage? Because there are some marriage conversations here, but if you're dating, if you're engaged, you can understand how you can begin to apply some of these things. Even if you're not a Christian, you can begin to understand how you can apply some of these things to your story. Now, what would it look like if we entered into a relationship and we said, I'm owed nothing, and I owe everything? Last week, I gave you homework. Some of you came to church for the very first time and were like, homework? I thought I graduated from school. But I just wanted you to consider some things. I wanted you to think about some things. And the first piece of homework that we gave you last week was to ask the question, what's in your box? What are your hopes and your dreams and your desires? And then the second question that we asked you was this: are you expecting someone to carry it for you? And maybe that's the tension that you're feeling in your relationship, because you're demanding, you're expecting, you have given responsibility and homework to the one that you love. And it doesn't feel like hopes, dreams, and desires to them. It feels like expectations. And I hope you spent some time thinking about that. Those of you that sent me what was in your box, I'm grateful to hear from you. I'm glad that you began to identify that, because our second piece of homework for this week is this. I want you to ask this question: what's in their box? The one that you're in relationship with, what's in their box? So at some point today or this week, I want you to sit down with them and ask, hey, would you tell me what's in your box? And listen, ladies in particular, if your husband asks you that question and you've been married for 20, 30, 40 years, don't allow your first response to be, we've been married for 20, 30, 40 years and you have no idea what's in my box? Just ask the question and then listen, and then if you're asked the question, respond with what's in your box and only that. Okay? And by the way, ladies, when you ask your fella what's in his box, he's going to answer in one of two ways initially. The first answer he's going to give you is, I don't know. Okay? And then the second, as he thinks about it, he's going to give you a second answer. And his second answer is going to be, nothing. And you want to know why we'll answer that way? Because we didn't know we have a box. But fellas, this is why it's important for you to think about this, because you may not know that you have a box, but you know what you're doing with your invisible box? You've handed it to the one that you love, and this is what they're feeling. And you saying nothing or I don't know doesn't help them. You want things to be better and you want to fight for one another, you need to know what's in your box. This is the less self question. And less self people are happier people. I was going to say selfless, but I don't think we ever are selfless. But I do think that we can choose to have less of ourself be involved here. Less self people have more meaningful relationships. So I want to invite you to ask that question this week. What's in your box? And then listen and shush. Maybe for you, you have some objections. You might be thinking to yourself, I get it. But here's the thing. If I let the pressure off, I don't know what's going to happen. If I ask that question, I'm not sure things will go well for me and for our relationship, and we are already teetering. Maybe you feel like this rope, and you've been spending your time in relationship playing tug of war. But I do want you to know that asking this question is the best way forward. And when you ask this question, what you're saying is, I will let go of the rope. And listen, this is going to be cheesy, but I think it's helpful. There's no hope until you let go of the rope. You already know that. You already believe that. Let go of the rope. And this is why I wanted to start with Paul's conversation about submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ, because God already did this for you. He let go of the rope. Paul wrote about it in a second letter that he wrote to Christians in Rome when he wrote, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. When there was no more hope, God let go of the rope and became hope for us. So, your homework is to ask, what's in their box? And then to listen. And by the way, maybe you have a second question that is stirring in you, but you're not going to say it out loud because you know the focus isn't on you. But you still have this question, and the question you're asking maybe privately in your own heart is, well, what about my box? Well, I'm glad you asked. And we'll answer that question next week. Let me pray for you. And so, Heavenly Father, this is hard. Relationships are hard. Being married's hard. Dating and being engaged is hard. But God, it's worth it. It's fun when we get it right. And so I pray that we would stop fighting against one another and start fighting for each other by being people who express gratitude and being people who choose to serve and submit out of reverence for Christ. God, I pray for the relationships that are represented in this room and in Redlands and online. And I pray that we wouldn't be afraid, that we would not let fear lead the way, but that we would be courageous and let go of the rope, and we would choose to love like Christ has loved us. Thank you for a space to be able to talk about these things. And thank you for sending Jesus to set us free from being selfish so that we could live a less self life. And we pray all of these things in his powerful name. Amen and amen and amen.
Amen. Can we thank Mike for that message?
Thank you again for joining us for this week's message. We believe your generosity is changing the world. If you'd like to partner with us, click the link in the description below. And we'll see you again next week.